Joseph Campbell is someone that I've been really fascinated by for quite a while now. He was an American professor of literature, and his work spanned many different aspects of the human experience. Specifically, he was looking at mythology and religion. Now, this book, The Power of Myth, is really an edited version of an interview that Bill Moyer, who's a journalist, did with Joseph back in the day. It's available here actually on YouTube. There's over 6 hours of video. I definitely recommend you go and check it out after this one. But this book and these interviews were really exploring purpose. They were exploring myth and exploring the concept of following your bliss. The first big idea that I took out of the book was the rapture of being alive. The quote goes like this: people say that what they're seeking is a meaning for life. And I don't think that's what we're really seeking. I think that what we're seeking is an experience of being alive, so that our life experiences on the purely physical plane will have resonances with our innermost being and reality, so that we actually feel the rapture of being alive. Now, I'm not going to lie, I had to look up the word rapture because this is the first time I'd ever heard it used in this context before. So I'll share you the definition that I found that I think fits. It's a state or experience of being carried away by overwhelming emotion. And I think one of the questions that maybe, is kind of like a typical question, what's the meaning of life? And this is a question that philosophers and scholars have really studied and kind of wrestled with for millennia, right? And it feels like a super deep question. And maybe it's the perfect question for Joseph, who's a very deep thinker, who studied these religions, studied these myths from all sorts of ancient civilizations. But what he's telling us here is that maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe we should be asking, what does it mean to be alive? And how do I get more of that? That's what we're going to continue to explore as we continue to go through this book, The Power of Myth. I do just want to quickly talk a little bit about the system that we're using for organizing these notes. You can see we've got kind of an AI-like web of over 100 different books that I've summarized on the channel, 600 big ideas, dozens of explorations, and dozens of practical tools that I pulled out from some of the world's greatest books. You can get access to this personal development AI by clicking the first link down below in the description or clicking the big blue join button on the YouTube channel. You can get access to this inside of any web browser. Any device, whether it's a phone, a laptop, a tablet, can get access directly to this kind of personal development AI, this summary of hundreds of different books and 600 plus ideas from those books that is going to drastically cut down the amount of time that you need to spend studying these big ideas to reduce your time to having a big impact on your life. The next piece that we're talking about is Sat, Chit, Ananda. Now, I came to this idea of bliss because in Sanskrit, which is a great spiritual language of the world, there are three terms that represent the brink, the jumping off place to the ocean of transcendence, and that's Sat, Chit, Ananda. The word Sat means being, the word Chit means consciousness, and the word Ananda means bliss or rapture. I thought, I don't know whether my consciousness is proper consciousness or not. I don't know whether what I know of my being is proper or not. But I know where my rapture is. So let me hang on to rapture. And that will bring me both my consciousness and my being. And I think it worked. And what I pulled from this quote and this idea is that the world is full of people, organizations that want to tell us the proper way of being. And honestly, it's because that's something that most of us are looking for, right? What's the meaning of life is the very first question we looked at here today. And it seems to me that most of Joseph's research is about religions, which are telling people how to kind of interact with the world, both the physical world or the conscious or the kind of real world, you can think of it, and the transcendental or the world of your consciousness, as he says here. So how do we know if what we're doing is right? Well, Joseph is going to suggest that we follow our bliss. But what does that mean for us? Well, bliss for me, it's like a feeling that you get. It's weightless, it's timeless, it's judgmentless. And one of the ways to get closer to that state is to reflect and to bring awareness to when you are and aren't in that state. A few questions you might visit are: what are some of the things that make me feel that blissful feeling? What are some things that make me feel less blissful or out of my bliss? And then what are some steps that you might take in order to find more of number one and less of number two? So this is the continued idea of following your bliss, following that weightless, timeless, judgmentless feeling, because that's really the only tangible guide that you might be able to find here. The next point we're going to talk about is this idea of a sacred place. And he says this is an absolute necessity for anybody today. You must have a room, a certain hour or so a day, where you don't know what was in the newspaper this morning. You don't know who your friends are. You don't know what you owe anybody, and you don't know what anybody owes you. This is a place where you can simply experience and bring forth what you are and what you might be. This is a place of creative incubation. At first, you might find that nothing happens there. But if you have a sacred place and you use it, something eventually will happen. And the question that I have for all of you, for myself, is: are you proactively creating this time? One common theme among my coaching clients is something that we call quiet time. I've spoken about it quite a lot on this channel, and it's exactly this: creating that sacred space. Creating that time that you can set aside to forget about your goals, forget about your current situation, and forget about the voices that are in your head telling you all the things that they tell you. This time allows you to tap closer into your true self and the self that is there, that's separate from these things in the outside world. And I love what Joseph says. He says, at first you might find nothing happens there. And that's certainly my experience. But if you have a sacred place and you use it, something might eventually happen. And that's the exact experience of myself and almost all of my coaching clients. At first, it feels like quiet time. It feels like this sacred space is kind of not really doing anything. But as you continue to explore, you realize that the sacred space, the quiet time, truly is everything. Because you're getting more in touch with your true self, the self that is separate from the outside world, which is one of the most important journeys that I've ever been on. The next piece we're talking about here, and I think one that's directly connected to that, is yourself equals positive, or this idea of being your own best friend. He says that Ramana Krishna once said that if all you think of are your sins, then you are a sinner. And when I read that, I thought of my boyhood, going to confession on Saturdays, meditating on the little sins that I had committed during the week. Now, I think one should go in and say, "Bless me, Father, for I have been great. These are the good things that I have done this week." Identify your notion of yourself with the positive rather than with the negative. Awareness is the beginning. Shaping action is the start. So we talked about awareness already, right? We talked about the sacred place. We talked about the quiet time. And then shaping action, or the way that you think of yourself, is really the start of a beautiful journey that many of us are on. Unfortunately, I think so many of us are living in this constant barrage of judgment from ourselves. From the moment that we wake up to the moment that we fall asleep, our mind kind of picks out and replays thousands of times all the misdeeds or the sins that we've committed during the week. And my question is that any way to really live? And what if there's another way? And this idea that we've talked about, this tool that I've created of being your own best friend, is a concept that I've become very familiar with. And it's very, very powerful. And it's exactly what we're talking about here. It's kind of being aware of, okay, I'm living in this constant barrage of judgment. The moment I wake up, I start judging myself. And the moment I fall asleep, I'm judging myself all along the way. And what Joseph says here is, let's flip that around. Let's do some work and let's look at how we can bless ourselves and think about the things that we've done great this week. That's something that I've really been continuing to work on. And being your own best friend is really just scratching the surface here. There's so many things you're judging yourself on, so many ways that you're whipping yourself in order to get certain things done. A lot of us set a certain goal and then we immediately start judging ourselves for not having met that goal. And that's kind of the way that we've learned through society to motivate ourselves in order to get something done. There's another side of this coin, though, where you can lift yourself up, you can support yourself instead of kind of berating yourself or looking at all the sins that you've committed in a way to motivate yourself. What you can do is actually lift yourself up and say, hey, there were a few things that didn't go so great this week. I didn't do the habits I said I would. I didn't check things off of my to-do list, whatever that might be for you. And what you can do with that is say, how might I get better next time? What does this look like? How can I support myself, knowing that I had all the best intentions, knowing that I'm probably capable of doing these things, knowing that I want the best for myself. What might I do next time in order to get better? That's a much healthier, much more sustainable way of motivating yourself rather than continuing to judge yourself against what you said you would do or said you wanted and what you didn't do. The next idea we'll touch on here is this idea of hidden helping hands. And Moyer asks Campbell a question here. He says, do you ever have this sense when you're following your bliss, as I have at moments, of being helped by hidden hands? Campbell says, all the time, it's miraculous. I even have a superstition that has grown on me as a result of invisible hands coming all the time. Namely, that if you do follow your bliss, you put yourself on a kind of track that has been there all the while, waiting for you. And the life that you ought to be living is the one that you are living. This is the idea of destiny in a lot of myth. When you see that, you begin to meet people who are in the field of your bliss, and they open doors for you. I say, follow your bliss and don't be afraid. And the doors will open where you didn't even know they were going to be. So the question I have with this piece is, do we believe that the world is conspiring in our favor? The world is helping you out along the way. And I know, as well as anybody does, that it's really hard to believe that that's the case. I mean, we've all had situations that just suck. There's no two ways about it. And it's hard to believe that we have hidden helping hands helping us along the way. But the truth is that we can't really see the future. We can't understand that the failure we feel now might be the most important lesson we've ever learned. I think back to times in my life where I was just so down on myself, feeling like I couldn't have screwed this up any worse than I did. And now looking back, that was one of the most transformative, transitionary times in my life. I think about when I closed down my gym, or when my business partner quit my marketing business. I think about those times and how down on myself I was. And I think about now where I am and how I wouldn't change that for the world. I think about those two things and I see those being the divergent path that I was on. I was following that and I didn't even know that I had helping hands along the way. And this feeling that the universe is conspiring in our favor makes it really easy to live in the right now, but it also turns our attention to the learnings and opportunities that you have in front of us. If something horrible was to happen to this YouTube channel tomorrow, I might, if I believe that I have these hidden helping hands, be able to think about how might this help me in the future? What might I be able to learn from this? What are the opportunities that I have in front of me now, given that I no longer have this thing that I was attached to? That's the way that I see the hidden helping hands playing out in my current reality. It makes reality a heck of a lot easier to deal with. Our next idea is this: hero is bigger than you. And he says that a hero is someone who has given his or her life to something bigger than themselves. When we quit thinking primarily of ourselves and of our own self preservation, we undergo a truly heroic transformation of consciousness. And this quote reminds me a lot of Life's Great Questions by Tom Rath. If you haven't watched that summary yet, I really recommend you check it out, where the big question is, what can I contribute? And I've come to believe that if you're feeling lost, like you can't find what your bliss might be, this is a really useful exercise for you. Take time, 10, 15, 30 minutes to write down a full page of what you think is currently wrong in the world. Things that you'd fix if you could. Think big here. Then what you can do is read it back and find a way that you can actually impact one of those things, however small it might be. I believe that can start walking us down the path of bliss. And that's where compounding, so many great books on compounding, Atomic Habits, The Compound Effect, The Slight Edge, I recommend you go and check out all those books as well. That's when those can really start to take place. Find a small thing that you can contribute and continue to follow that pathway towards bliss, towards compounding, towards having a big impact. I want to thank all of you so much for being with me today. I have 2 tools connected to this note that channel members, people who have access to the personal development AI, can check out if you're interested in learning more about being your own best friend or what quiet time might look like for you. You can click the first link down below in the description or the big blue join button. Join the channel, get access to the personal development AI, and learn a lot more about those tools. I hope to see you in the next video, and I do recommend that you go and check out some of the books that I referenced. Life's Great Question by Tom Rath, Atomic Habits, The Slight Edge, and The Compound Effect are all really great additions to this book. Hope to see you there.